to another episode of the Difficulty Adjustment Podcast. I'm Gustavo Flores. I'm in La Casa Satoshi, and I'm accompanied by Claudia Sotomayor, who's our co-host. Claudia, would you like to say a few words?
Sure. We're back. Another week of the difficulty adjustment. So, yeah, I'm Claudia. I'm riding shotgun with Gustavo. And let's get into it. Bitcoin Mexico, AI, failed takeovers. What's going on?
Yeah, we're gonna take a little bit of a slowdown on the geopolitical news on the show. The main topic has now become AI and specifically AI hacking multiple systems. So we talked about 2 weeks ago, we talked about the hack on the Cold Card wallet. And now there's been a hack on the Bitbox wallet, which is another major Bitcoin hardware wallet. There's been a hack on BTC Pay Server, which is a very used system for accepting Bitcoin payments as merchants. And there was also a hack of the customer list of the Trezor hardware wallet. So a lot of people that got hacked or were vulnerable to the attack on Cold Card migrated to Bitbox and Trezor, and now they have to update the firmware, or now they're going to be on a dark web list forever if they purchase a Trezor thinking they were safe from the Cold Card. They expose themselves to other risks. So, of course, there's a bigger question to ask ourselves, right? This is not just about Bitcoin. This is not about hardware wallets. This is about just how software engineering and cybersecurity is changing through the deployment of new AI models that are always stronger, that are always more local and easier to control and have less security controls, particularly when you introduce the Chinese AI models in the equation. So we're going to talk about all that. How does that sound to you, Claudia? Muted, Claudia.
Yeah, so this sounds great because I'm actually a little bit ignorant about all of this. I know lots of things are happening in AI, and it's a little bit scary. Like, I'm afraid to even ask at this point, like, what's going on. So, please go ahead.
Perfect. So we're going to jump in and talk about the three vulnerabilities in the Bitcoin world that I mentioned. So let me just open my browser for that. So actually, another hardware wallet customer data also got hacked, called SafePal, which is also another alternative. Not one that I recommend at all, by the way. Trezor and Bitbox I do recommend, but SafePal is quite popular, and all their customer lists got hacked. So let me share my screen now, and we can see that first the BTC Pay Server advice security advisory. Okay, so this was posted about more than 10 days ago, 12 days ago. So what happened is that if you were running BTC Pay Server on a version prior to 2.42, you were vulnerable to an attack that exposed your credentials of your LND node. So if you were using BTC Pay Server to accept payments in your store, either digitally or physically, and you were using an LND node, which is one of the main Lightning Network implementations to accept payments over the Lightning Network, well, you have to update your BTC Pay Server instance now. Why? Because someone could simply bypass any security control, access your LND macaroon files, which are your credentials for your Lightning node, and they could simply just steal all your money. This was discovered by Craig Raw, who's the developer behind Spiral Wallet. All of his Lightning channels of his Lightning node got hacked. I believe 3 Bitcoins were hacked. And that's how he was able to find the vulnerability, to disclose the vulnerability. And that's how the BTC server was able to figure out the issue and uh, create a maintenance release for this. So this was definitely also in the wake of the hack of the cold card. So the team Red also was responsible for helping here, or the Red Team. The Red Team are a bunch of the Bitcoin developers that are going in all Bitcoin open source code repositories and finding bug vulnerabilities and applying the fixes, or simply disclosing the vulnerabilities to the respective teams, such as it was in the case with BTC Pay Server. So everyone that runs BTC Pay Server is advised to update. And one important detail is that if you update your BitSpace server to the new version, your macaroon credential files will automatically rotate. So you don't have to regenerate your macaroons manually. You can still do it if you want to be ultra careful. But here it says that it will automatically regenerate your credential files so that you can be secure, right? And you can also review your activity in case some unusual access was detected. So that's the first bug, Claudia. How do you think about it? Was that clear?
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot going on. And with the in Lightning, it's already kind of. I used to run a Lightning node routing to route payments, and later I felt like, man, like this is too much risk. Now with BTC Pay Server, this is one step further, which is like actually routing payments for businesses. Correct?
That's exactly right. So, I
Yeah.
mean, the Lightning Network doesn't discriminate. So, when I run a
Right.
Lightning node, I can just route payments for anybody, right? But these were people that were running Lightning that wanted to accept Lightning payments in their stores, right, using BTC Pay Server and doing so in a sovereign way, so they would have full control of their keys. They would fail, but BTC Pay Server had a vulnerability that would expose their Lightning Network funds to get hacked by anyone who was able to figure out that there was an LND node here too that could have been hacked.
So the fallout from the cold card fiasco has been rather loud, and this BTC Pay Server thing happened like shortly after, and so I haven't really heard a lot about it, like in terms of like how many people were affected, like in terms of funds stolen, right? Uh, and this is not related to the Lightning wallets like not working. That's a separate issue with bolts going down.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Claudia. So we got a few customers that were asking us that question over the last few days. Like, is audio? Why doesn't Lightning work on audio? It's because a lot of wallets were not actually Lightning wallets. They were like Liquid Network or on-chain wallets, and they were using Bolt's swap service to swap from Liquid or on-chain into Lightning. So no, that is completely separate. That was an issue related to the Bolt's team, and we can talk about that in a second. But the BTC Pay server problem is specific to BTC Pay server, so it's not an issue with LND. However, it's like the BTC Pay server system had an open door for LND nodes that were running within their systems, right? And that affected merchants that accepted Bitcoin payments over Lightning that wanted to do so in a sovereign way, right? I think here's the reminder that everything you do, like we love to announce holding your own keys, and like I
Mhm.
couldn't be prouder to stand up for that, but it has its own risks, and here once again we see one of those risks.
Right, right. So okay, so BTC Pay Server like published a fix for that. It's not an ongoing problem.
Exactly. So
Okay.
now it's fixed. You just have to install the new version, and you'll be without a problem back online.
Okay.
So I got on the bolts thing. There was a new development. Okay, so thank you for bringing that up because I hadn't envisioned first to talk about that. So bolts initially said that they were disabling the service. They said this 15 days ago. So basically, a few like 2 3 days after the cold card hack, and then we found out through Twitter that they got hacked. Okay, user funds were never at risk because Bolts was
What?
non-custodial, but they had a lot of losses, Claudia. So they suspended the service because they got a lot of losses. So probably their Bitcoin got hacked.
Oh my
Um,
God.
yeah,
This is terrible. So this is totally separate from the whole cold card situation. They independently, separately got hacked and lost funds.
well, we will never know what really happened,
No?
right? Were they holding? Maybe they were. Maybe it was related somehow. Maybe they
Or
were.
was it like, yeah, was there setup? dependent on cold card and their cold cards were vulnerable.
Exactly. Those are things we will
Mhm,
probably never know, right? But
mhm.
maybe not. Both like require had the requirement of having funds online, right? So they were at risk of being hacked. Like all platforms that have hard wallets are at risk of being hacked, and they got hacked. That's it, right? They severed, but they sold the business. So that's what the news is that they are not capable of going forward without more resources because they had a lot of incurred losses. So they sold, either they sold the business or investors came in. Okay, so I
This
think it's
is
one of
major.
those.
Wow. So, but they're saying that user funds were not lost, but it's the company's Bitcoin that part of the company's Bitcoin they lost, their treasury.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So the next one, the one that is the biggest one in my radar right now, is the Bitbox hack. Okay, so this is another one that came out, I believe, yeah, only yesterday. So there's a new version already, so you can just update and you'll be fine, right? So once again, this is never like the cold card hack. None of the hacks that I showed were like the cold card hack, right? The cold card hack was the most fatal hack or vulnerability possible. The entropy of the device was faulty, which means that everything, every wallet that was generated with that entropy was compromised. So just a massive tragic story. All the other hacks, they're savable, right? The Beat Space Server one, Craig Raw got hacked 3 Bitcoin. Bitbox, so far we haven't had any reports of stolen user funds. Okay, so that is good. And honestly, the edge cases are extremely niche. So let's go through the edge cases. Okay.
Okay. Before you go ahead, so the vulnerability was in the firmware of the device itself, not like in the desktop application.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead.
All right. So one exploit, the first exploit is something that would have enabled an attacker to manipulate users into installing malicious firmware on their devices. This was discovered internally. So this is a severe vulnerability because it would enable someone to steal funds, but it requires, this would first require a successful phishing attack on the user to get them to install manipulated firmware. So someone that would install a fake version of the Bitbox app could accidentally install manipulated firmware that could then allow them to steal the money. Okay, so that is the risk here. It's not that there was an existent issue inside the device that would allow you to lose money. Is that if you made the mistake of using a fake version of the app, you could install new firmware, and that new firmware could be malicious if you were doing it through unofficial channels, right? And that's where the money could have stolen. However, there's simply no reports about this. So I think that one's pretty simple. Does that make sense to you, Claudia?
It makes sense. It's actually multi-layered vulnerability. Like it's not uh, the the mistake, not the mistake, but the fault itself does not lead to a vulnerability. There's has to be exploited, and then that is what opens up uh, the potential for a phishing attack. So it's multi-layered. I mean,
Precisely,
okay,
exactly.
okay.
Multi-layered. It's
Hmm.
extremely unlikely, right?
Hmm.
So there was another issue, okay, something called memory corruption issue. It applies when the multi-addition. So if you had a Bitbox that was for like multiple cryptocurrencies, not just for Bitcoin. Um,
Hmm.
if it had not been set up with a wallet yet and it was used on a malicious host device. So, once again, a very theoretical issue where I have not yet set up my Bitbox, but I connect it to a malicious computer. And if the computer is malicious, it can enable arbitrary code execution that can also potentially install malicious firmware, right? So very similar
So,
end,
I,
but
uh-huh.
another door, let's say.
So the Bitbox is not a fully air gap device, correct? It's a hardware wallet, yes, but it
Correct.
does connect. It does connect to your computer.
100%.
So any device that is connected to an internet-enabled other device computer, this is a risk, right? Like malicious firmware being downloaded on the external device. So anyway, like with Bitcoin, like for maximum security, like air gap is always the best. This is a risk here. Like Bitbox is admitting to it, but any hardware wallet that is plugged in has this risk.
You're totally right. So, these are like very theoretical risks. Once again, like the first one requires you downloading malicious software and install updating your firmware. So, like, don't like, oh, one good practice is to always ensure you're downloading it from the official source. For example, such as bitbox.swiss, that is their official website. But if you had bought the device, you could also see in the instructions of the device of the box the exact website to go to download. And the second one, like you said, Claudia, it is related to being connected to a malicious host device. So you have to connect it to a computer, and using an AirGap hardware wallet would have helped here, but also it would require the for it to be exploited, you would have to require it to a malicious host device, which is also something you should never do with any of your Bitcoin wallets.
And one more note about this, which is, I mean, that Swiss is not a common extension for our website. Okay. So right here, to me, like bitbox.com is not registered. So anybody can easily go to bitbox.com and download malicious software on their Bitbox device. You know?
Right. Totally right.
Yeah.
Which is why, once
Yeah.
again, these tools are for experts. The Bitbox is at a
Right.
very expert level. Hardware wallet, something not to for those that are just initiating themselves into Bitcoin, or those that are very risk averse about their Bitcoin self custody. I think there are either better hardware wallets, easier hardware wallets than the Bitbox for new users, but everyone should just start with a simple wallet on their phone. Or if you want collaborative custody or multi-institutional custody, there's options for that too. Hardware wallets or even self custody shouldn't be the only solution that is presented to people, because some are simply not technical, some simply don't want to deal with the technical headaches of updating firmware and things like that. So it becomes more and more understandable as time goes by that there's a place in this industry for alternative forms of custody that are well built, such as collaborative custody in projects like Casa, or multi-institutional custody in projects like on-ramp Bitcoin. So the last vulnerability of the Bitbox is about a silent payments lock of funds. So first, what is a lock of funds? A lock of funds isn't a theft of funds. However, it allows the attacker to to register the change output. So whenever I make a Bitcoin payment, there's some change, right? I have one Bitcoin. I want to pay you half a Bitcoin. Half a Bitcoin goes to you. Half a Bitcoin goes to my change address. What is the logic that decides the change address? If that logic is hijacked, someone can choose a different change address in my wallet, but I wouldn't know exactly to where to find the funds. Okay, what does that mean? Let me take a step back. When you use a wallet, either a hardware or a mobile wallet, you always back up your funds through a phrase, right? And the phrase, the 2412 word phrase, derives into millions of private keys, even billions of private keys. And all of those private keys, they have a specific Bitcoin address that matches it. So when you choose a change address, you choose an address of your wallet, but which one, right? That is called a derivation path. A derivation path is what makes it easy to find the addresses, to find the private key of the addresses where you have Bitcoin, just using your seed phrase, your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, plus the derivation path. It's just like a treasure map, right? It tells you where to find the private keys because there are billions of private keys in a seed phrase. So here, when we talk about lock of funds, we say that an attacker was able to change the change address to still one that you control, but you don't know where to find it. Is it position one or is it position 17 billion? You don't know. And that's the hack here. The attacker knows where to find it. The attacker knows the derivation path to getting to that private key. And the attacker will basically tell you, give me one Bitcoin, and I will tell you what the derivation path is so you can find the private key. You can derive the private key from your seed phrase um, to find the Bitcoin, right?
Okay. Okay. So it's basically making the victim susceptible to getting blackmailed to get their Bitcoin, like pay in order to know where to get it from.
Exactly right. That is the lock
Okay.
of funds, right? Because I've locked you out
Okay.
of the funds and I
Hmm.
know how you can recover them. I cannot access them, but you cannot access them either until I tell you where they are.
Right. So it's not like the Bitcoin is stolen, but they keep it from you, and you have to pay to be able to get it. That's crazy.
Exactly.
So I'm actually not super familiar with how silent payments work or what is a silent payment. Is it a private payment, like more private than a regular payment? Can you give me a couple sentences about that?
Right, totally. So a silent payment, and I'm gonna go through the Bitbugs guide right here, but because I want to find like a little visual explainer for it. So when I want you to pay me with a silent payment, I will hand you off this. Okay, this is what we.
Why would anybody want a silent payment, first of all?
Okay, what is the benefit? No, but I have to explain it in order to understand the
Oh,
benefit.
okay. Okay,
Let
go
me
ahead.
let me. I was just about to get there. So, but thank you for adding that because it repositions my answer. So when I want you to pay me, or when I want anybody to pay me, I give them the same address. Okay. One of the challenges of Bitcoin is that in order to protect your privacy and your security too, you have to change Bitcoin addresses every time you receive a payment, right? But your Bitcoin wallet today basically does that automatically. It generates a new address every time you click on receive. And every time you get a payment, you get it to a different address. However, it lands in the same wallet. Like I said just a few minutes ago, you have one wallet, you have multiple addresses. However, what if I don't want to be changing addresses all the time? What if I simply want to have an address in my Bitcoin, in my Twitter handle, and just say donations here? If I would use a regular Bitcoin address, I would be reusing an address all the time. And that's where silent payments come in. How the silent payments work? I give you this every time, Claudia, but on the blockchain, this doesn't appear as where I receive my Bitcoin. A regular Bitcoin address appears where I receive my Bitcoin. Excuse me for scrolling up. I'm trying to find an example. Yeah, there's no examples. But the point is that you send it to me here. You enter this in your wallet, but your wallet will derive an address and unique address where I will receive the Bitcoin. And in the blockchain, you're not gonna see this. You're gonna see the address that was derived from this by your wallet. And how do we make sure that the silent payment output address that is derived from the silent payment address is unique? Because it uses the entropy of your public key. So by combining the entropy of this with the entropy of your public key, which is paying me, you can basically derive unique output addresses each transaction, which means that 1,000 people could pay me here, But someone that is trying to analyze my behavior on the Bitcoin blockchain cannot see a relationship between these all thousand payments because they all go to a different address. And there's no way to establish a relationship between those addresses.
I see. That's actually quite useful, and it is beautiful because then everybody that pays to that address there, they don't know how much money that address has received. Actually, they can only see the payment that they themselves made.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly the purpose for never using
Mm.
addresses. So if anybody's curious, we have a section on this in Bitcoin Optic where we cover silent payments with an explainer, but also just a bunch of updates to the specification, but also to the various implementations of silent payments. So let me take a little step back here. What? Any thoughts, Claudia? You wanna share right now? Any questions?
No, it's just more like the overview that Bitcoin has had a rough couple of weeks with hardware wallets being hacked or other ones being vulnerable, Bitcoin services going down, long-time users being affected. And for a new person or somebody that's not super technical, you hear all of this and it's like, oh my God, Bitcoin's on fire, right?
Right.
We've been here before. I mean, that doesn't scare me, but it's a lot. It's a lot like this summer on the Bitcoin front. I also think that this is necessary. This is just like a correction, right? This is there's times of expansion and then times where you go back in your cocoon and you get stronger. And to me, this is a time when Bitcoin is getting stronger and the weak links are getting shuffled out. So what remains after this cycle would be a stronger product across the industry.
100%. And I think that's what bear markets have always been, right? When I came in, it was 2015. It was on the wake of Mount Gox. Basically, the conclusion of the Mount Gox hack was led to the on the fallout of the Mount Gox hack, which I think remains the biggest hack in Bitcoin terms to this day. That's when Trezor launched, just shortly after the first hardware wallet launched. That's when new exchanges came in. People are like, why are we all using the same exchange in the whole planet? Right? Why are we all, and we don't have wallets too? So wallets came in, plus, okay, so in the second burn market in 2017, 2018, at least in Canada, where I grew up, the conclusion was about the wake of the Quadriga CX hack, was about creating more exchanges in Canada's, accepting for the Canadian sector to accept at a minimum the crypto market to not make it all shady, because Quadriga was just a shady player. So it kind of got like institutionalized after that with bad consequences, but also good benefits. And in the wake of the 2022 FTX and Celsius hack, well, I think people learned about that there's no such thing as free yield, right? If there's high yield, you are the yield, and you're basically just getting paid in the risk that your money's just gonna disappear, and it ends up disappearing. So I think that also was a wake up call at that time, right? So what can we learn from this one? I think we can learn to use AI to our advantage to become better software developers, to secure better systems, to not take things in to simply verify rather than just trust, to actually do the work and not just trust blindly. So I think these companies, BitSpace Server, they're managing it as well as they can. Also, Bitbox. So I think we can all learn from it. We can all take a little week or 2 weeks off developing fancy features on our platform to make sure security is uptight. That's what we're doing at Audio, and I think that's what everyone's doing. That is gonna remain part of this industry, right? Either you adapt or you get left behind. So yeah, that's it. Anything else you want to add before I jump into the next topic?
No, please go ahead.
Awesome. So the next one is the fact that Trezor and both SafePal and Trezor got hacked. Their customer data got hacked. So here the summary says that both of these hardware wallet makers disclose significant data breaches, more than 53,000 customer records, including names, emails, and addresses. This comes from shipping providers. For example, ShipMonk was hacked with a SQL injection hack, which is one of the most classical hacks. Um, and SafePal was breached through the order tracking plugin. Okay, so we've seen this movie before with Ledger. We know what happens.
Right.
People receive emails. People even get extorted. Right. So this is extremely risky, particularly risky in a country like France, where most of these attacks have occurred over the past year. But this is also something that you should always be, if you're like full paranoid mode, you already have a you already have a postal, how do you call that, Claudia? Your
When somebody goes postal,
No, like when you have another address.
a virtual private mailbox,
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean.
or yeah, or like drop shipping, PO box. I mean,
PO
multiple
box.
things.
Exactly. That's
Okay.
what I meant. Right.
Okay.
PO box.
Mhm.
Or use a virtual address to not. You really want to be careful to not like accidentally have to to fear that someone's going to attack you in your home, right? So you could use, and you could either buy it in person. For example, you got to be really careful when you buy it in person. But I know now that in the United States, you can buy hardware wallets now at Best Buy. I think you can buy both the
Yeah.
Ledger and the BitKey. So that's
Mhm.
a good strategy to not have
Right.
endure this risk. Also, if you're in Mexico and you're part of the Mexican community, you can also join a community and order directly at the community location. For example, like I said, Satoshi, we can help with that, right? So you always got to be careful. Always got to assume that customer data gets hacked all the time. So you always got to be careful with that, right? Uh,
So I have a question about this. So for many people, like say, like they bought a Trezor or a Ledger, they bought it a long time ago, and they don't know, like, oh, maybe I wasn't exposed here. How can somebody check if their address was leaked? Is
right.
that possible?
There's this
And
web.
and the second part to the question is, why do you think these wrench attacks are more popular in France?
We're gonna get to the friends question in a second
Okay.
because I think that's a very interesting topic.
Okay.
But like, there's this website, okay, which tells you if your email address has been pwned. Okay, so I think you can also find the equivalent for home addresses. But here, for example, I could enter Gustavo at swapido.com, and I know that I was part of one data breach, and which was it? It was Suno. So I signed up to Suno for generating music with AI, and Suno got hacked. So my email address, my name, my even my partial credit card data, phone number, physical address, purchases were hacked. So that's the way. That's how you find out, Claudia. You use Have I Been Pwned or equivalent websites that will basically browse all the data that is found in all the reports, but not just the reports. Literally, they will browse the dark web for data that has been sold that has your email or your home address. Did you know about this, Chloe? Chloe, you're muted.
Sorry, I have too many things in the bottom here, and I accidentally like enable whisper flow. Separate from that, no, I have heard of this before, but I've always been afraid to use it because I feel like if I use it, maybe like I'm just making myself a target. But I think this is a well intentioned website. Uh, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's definitely there's always the risk, right? Like for example, here I could
Mm-hmm.
install one password, but what if get one password then gets hacked, right? So you never want to
Mm-hmm.
fall for like I'm trying to remediate a solution, so I also fall into another. into another problem. But yeah, I think this website's pretty good. It's been around for a while, and there might be others that will allow you to search like data on the dark web where your information could be found.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, but I think at this point it has become clear that like customer data is definitely vulnerable, right? Right. What's going on right now? Okay, so let's take a step
Yeah.
back. I talked about all the details of these hacks in the Bitbox, in the BeatSpace server, and now in Trezor and SafePal. But what is truly going on here? So the problem is that the AI models, in my opinion, the problem is we've now crossed the chasm, you could say, or crossed the point of no return, where the AI models are now more powerful than they've ever been. But not only that, you can now run them on your own devices without any controls. That's not the case for ChatGPT and Claude, but it is the case for Kimi, Quen, and other AI models that mostly come from China. Okay, so
Mhm.
that is the situation that we face ourselves in, and the question is really what can we do. So my what I think is, as much as these tools will allow us to attack, to find vulnerabilities, they also allow us to defend ourselves, and that's what we should be doing, right? We should be focused on in defending ourselves, leveraging these tools to defend ourselves, find the vulnerabilities before the attackers find it, attack ourselves, and simply become better through this process, right? And in the AI ecosystem, was just clear the fast pace we're moving at. For example, I think I told you this, Claudia, yesterday, that when Opus 4.6 came out at the beginning of the year, I was absolutely mesmerized about its power. Today, Quen, which is the model from the Alibaba team, it has the same strength as Opus 4.6, plus it can run locally on your computer. So that's absolutely crazy, right? To
Right.
know that it's like, you remember in the 1940s, you could have all these massive computers in the Department of Defense or I don't know where. And then it took like decades for it to be available at home in a small
Right.
computer.
Like a mainframe computer down to like to be able to take it home that took decades to go from that size to the other. Yeah.
But I think it's basically that, but it took 8 months instead. It was you needed a massive server to run 4.6. Now you can run it on a MacBook Pro with 24 gigs of RAM, which doesn't even cost $2,000, right? So, and this 8 months ago was the state of the art model that was only possible to run in computers that were worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now can just be run locally by any developer, right? How many people have MacBook Pros around the world that have 24 gigs of RAM? About 15, 20 million people. Okay, so like this is actually very accessible. Not everyone's going to run it, but it's just clear that it has become very accessible, right? And that is just the latest one, the Quen one that I just mentioned. But there's just so many other models out there that are making huge changes right now in the industry.
This is all happening so fast. Not just that it's happening fast, but that the rate of speed is also increasing. So it's accelerating, um, and like more and more. It's like an exponential curve here. It seems. So,
Exactly.
uh, like, I mean, how far does it go? You know, how fast can we go?
Who
um,
knows? Nobody
yeah.
knows, right? And my
Mhm.
guess is as good as any's, but I think we're gonna still. I think the pay it just hasn't deaccelerated, right? This is why I
Mhm.
was saying in the past episode when people were saying that we're the clear moment of the AI bubble and it could just burst at any second. Maybe, but maybe not. Maybe the rate of the technology development is still so fast that it still has a long way to go. And if you were starting to short the Google or the tech stocks or the AI stocks at valuations, maybe you're gonna have a bad surprise when they are worth 3, 4 times more in a few months, in a few years, before they correct back, right? Will they correct ever?
Right.
Probably. We just don't know where. And if I kind of take a sort of, if I compare the pace of technological developments with the valuations, I think and like kind of make an equivalence between both. I think we still got a long way to go, because clearly we're just seeing new releases all the time, and clearly, if things were going slower, if things were going slower, we wouldn't
Mhm.
have so many hack issues right now. The
Right.
proof that it's going fast are the vulnerabilities.
Right. Right. Well, I'm also just thinking, like, for instance, like I use AI, and I know that I'm using like not even 5% of its capabilities. Right. The majority of people out there are not using AI like at all. So the efficiency, the improvements of this technology are like we're barely scratching the surface here. So that's why I don't know, like when it's talking about like correcting and how fast can we go, like these are ideas that are wrestling each other in my mind. Um, yeah.
Right. Yeah, the majority of the population in the whole planet has never used AI, I believe. I
Mhm.
believe it's about like 2, 3%, like 5 to 8% of US households that even have a paid AI subscription. And
Mhm.
for those that use it regularly, the AI usage is even lower. So it's absolutely crazy to see how we haven't yet reached even 10% of adoption for the regular population. However, for devs, I looked at these stats yesterday, and specifically for the software engineering industry, 90% of developers report using AI frequently at their jobs. 50% report using it daily. Okay, so for software developments, the adoption curve has already happened. 90% are using regularly, 50% are using it daily, and probably in paid environments, right? Which,
Mhm.
however, for the general population, it's still a whole different story. I wanted to show the leaderboard, which is something that I'm always looking at, which shows the new models that are coming out. So, of course, Claude Opus 5 remains at top with Fable, right? But Kimi K3, which, like I said, is open weight and you can run your own machine, or you can even rent by the hour completely uncensored. Well, it's really close, Claudia. It's almost there.
Mhm.
Full
So,
Chinese.
so here's a question. Like a Claude Pro subscription costs $200 a year. Okay. So you're telling me that I can do everything Claude Pro can do with a Kimi K3, but I don't have to spend the $200?
No, you're gonna spend way more money, Claudia. So, because where are you gonna run Kimi K3? To run Kimi K3, you probably need a Mac Studio that costs $25,000.
Got it. Okay. I cannot run that one. I can do the one that I can run on my computer is the Grok, or what did you call it?
No, it's the new
The,
Quen.
the Quen. The Quen. Yeah, you passed it.
Yeah, I think it's Quen 3.48. Uh,
3.8. Yeah,
no,
13. The Alibaba one.
no, maybe I'm mistaken. Quen AI model open weight. So it's, yeah, it's, this is it. Quen 3.8 max and the local friendly Quen 3.8 27 billion dense model. So this one that's right here, almost at the top, right, not that far behind,
Mm-hmm.
has a version to run locally on your device. So yeah, you could run this on your device. However, it would probably consume all the resources of your device. Also,
Right.
another issue with running local models is that, yeah, you can run the model, but you're gonna have a very short context window. A
Mm-hmm.
benefit of using Claude and these other models is that they have very big context windows, because that requires large amount of RAM too. So maybe you could run it, but it
I
would be very
see.
efficient.
I
But you
see.
have the freedom to run it. That's the point.
I see. Because then technically the $200 that I'm paying is for the computing space, not so much for the model itself. Because I can have the model like open weight or available, but I don't have the hardware for it. So really, I'm just renting computer space with the $200.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Okay.
Plus,
Okay.
the reason why it's more less expensive is that
Mhm.
the companies like OpenAI and Anthropic are subsidizing your AI use.
Mhm.
They want you to be a customer. So they will compete by subsidizing your use. So you're probably getting, I don't know, the other day I made a little calculation and you're getting multiple times more value than you're paying. If you
So
can,
how much if they were like if that claim is indeed true and they're subsidizing it, if they were not subsidizing it, how much do you think a Club Pro subscription would cost?
um, well,
Roughly, like double,
the real
triple?
question is how much are you willing to pay for it, Claudia?
Ask me again, please.
The real question is how much are you willing to pay it? Let's say I
I don't
told
want to. I don't want to
you,
say it. What if they're listening and then they spike it up for me?
what if I told you the alternative is to not having this in your life? How much are you willing to pay for it?
Well, are there free options? Because if everybody were in cahoots, it's a
No,
different
no, let's
story.
say
But
everybody,
mhm,
look, it's just economic
mhm,
reality has hit in. Nobody's
yeah,
subsidizing.
mhm,
Everybody's serving at the same price, or
okay.
the question is, how much are you willing to pay for it? You pay right now, let's say $25 a month. How much are you willing to pay for it for that?
I mean, I could easily triple it.
Well, I could easily 10x it, Claudia. I could
Yeah.
easily, if the alternative was not having AI in my life, I would pay $250 for what I pay $25 a month for. If there was
Yeah.
nothing more competitive, right? I would pay
Right.
$1,000 for what I pay $100 for. So that's
Mhm,
where I think the price is going to be 5 to 10 times
mhm,
higher.
mhm,
But also, we don't know. We just
mhm.
don't know
Yeah.
unless again,
Because
the
really, I mean, it's also a matter of time because a lot of the things that we do with AI, not everything, but a lot of the things we do, you can also manually do it. It just takes more time, right? So, yeah,
But how much if that's how much is that time worth to you? To me, it's worth a lot of
right,
money, right? So that's
right,
why I would
right.
pay 10 times what I'm paying right now. So that's what
Mhm,
I think could potentially be priced. However, we don't know, right? Like I just said, the Quen model is almost as strong as Opus 4.6, but now you can run it locally, so it has become extremely cheaper. Maybe in a few months, years, it will be so cheap to run that it's not gonna cost is never gonna become a problem. But probably we're always gonna have new frontier models that are gonna cost
mhm.
very expensively, and at some point, those frontier models are gonna be closer to economic reality than subsidies.
Right. They're letting everybody come and play, and then they're gonna start charging. Yeah,
Exactly.
like for real. Right.
Exactly. So yeah.
Uh, hmm.
Anything else you want to add?
About this, no, but like the other day, not separately, privately, not in the podcast, but what do you think this means in terms of like national security and defense? Because these open weight models are, you could say, like they're actually quite threatening. Is anybody saying like China don't do that? Or I mean, to me, it seems like America's trying to be responsible or more respectful of how dangerous this is. And China's like throwing caution to the wind. Like I usually thought of the Chinese government like more conservative, but in this AI thing, they're like it's a Wild West situation.
Right. So, there's always a question between like principles and strategy, right? Are they
Mm-hmm.
naturally believers in open source technology and not necessarily, right? It's not like they have those principles.
Right.
They just see it as part of their strategy, right? It makes sense for them to pursue this strategy while their competition is pursuing the opposite strategy, right? So I think it makes total sense. However, I would say, Claudia, that I'm not sure. I'm not sure which is the best strategy here. I tend to believe that it's the Chinese one. I tend to believe that freedom is always better, right? And it's so ironic that it comes from China, and the United States is on the opposite side. But I tend to actually believe in the idea of freedom, of transparency, of letting the small guy have a chance versus the big guy, right? This It's really about that, Claudia, because these uncensored models, the uncensored to the public, they're not uncensored to the U.S. government. They're not, excuse me, they're not censored to the US government. They're not censored to the big companies. They're just censored to you and I. We are the threads. They are the rulers, right? We're being ruled by, and they rule us, right? That is clearly the framework being established here. However, the Chinese open source ecosystem is way freer, way fairer. So it allows us in the Bitcoin ecosystem to defend ourselves against further vulnerabilities. Right now, all the guys, if you listen to Kaye BTC or Rob Hamilton or even Nate from our team and other guys, everybody's saying the American models are killing us. They're not helping us. Well, the Chinese, we got to fully rely on the Chinese models. The American models are not even going to help us. Yesterday, I asked him a question about how Bitcoin worked, and it said, I'm not going to help you with that. Uh,
Really?
yeah, that's how it works, Claudia. That's how, in
Okay.
my opinion, I know that some people might watch the show and think I'm just a Chinese bull and an American bear, but to me, it's like it couldn't be clearer than this, Claudia. It's also about who has the position in the current world order. When you have the top position, it's all about defending your position, preserving your
Yeah.
status,
Right.
which is why
Right.
you take a more risk averse approach, right?
Hmm.
When you're the underdog, you have nothing to lose, which is why
Hmm.
you have a like more freedom of
Yeah.
industry.
No, like with this comment, actually, it reminded me of during the pandemic, during COVID times, there were all these restrictions on businesses, like how many customers they could have. Like say if you're a restaurant, right? Like, oh, you have capacity for 100, but you can only really use 20. So like they're throttling, right? With the American AI models, they're throttling the capacity, right? What you can do with it or not. But a lot of those restrictions that happened during COVID like would not apply to Amazon or Walmart or like the really big global stores, right? Whereas the mom and pop, small Main Street businesses were restricted and they had to close. And anyway, I see it a little bit like along those lines that yeah, it should be open. Why can I have the same access that they have? Like I need to protect myself equally, right? So
Right.
um,
And it's by
yeah.
law. Literally,
Hmm.
they just said
Hmm.
we have this legal framework, the export
Hmm.
arms control, and we're just gonna apply it here. And yeah, it's clear that the Chinese ecosystem has taken a different approach, and it's definitely working. One another sign that it's working. Well, Mark Zuckerberg came out with a new model that is closed source, but his previous model was open source. um, so they are the Facebook ecosystem is coming out with multiple open source models. Actually, no, they released a closed source one, but now they released an open source one. So let me show you on my screen. So this was a week ago.
Muse Glimmer.
Glimmer,
Okay.
an open agentic model that runs on your device. So open source the model weights under a permissive license. So you're now seeing Facebook joining the open source ecosystem. I mean, they've been trying for a while, but now they actually have like a good open source model. The previous ones were not that good. So
Mhm.
I think there's definitely some space in the American ecosystem for the large AI models, for some AI models to be open source. However, definitely I would classify, Claudia, the Donald Trump administration approach to this as very interventionist. Okay, very left wing economic interventionist approach. Right. Let's
Okay.
regulate it.
Okay.
Let's approve it. Let's control it. Also, this has
And
also
like protective, like to me it sounds like very protective of like a an elite, so to speak, to not be threatened.
right. You could argue that
Yeah.
is it.
Mm,
But
okay.
I mean, you could even say more. For example, no, it's just I think that the government, they really think they need to be the ones in charge. That I
Mhm.
think it's really about them thinking that this is so big that they need to be in charge. Because they're also purchasing stock in multiple of the AI companies, right? How many companies has the Donald Trump administration purchased stock from? Well, I know they bought about 10% of Intel, right?
Right. I remember when I saw that, I anyway, I'm not going to express political opinions here, but I found that very concerning that the US government would have such a high stake in a computer company when also the the share of the American economy that the government is responsible for is steadily increasing, right? So now it's like a third of the American economy is like government spending. When we get to 90 plus, where we can officially declare ourselves communist, in the past it was nowhere near 30%. I mean, it was like less than 5%, right? So you cannot be a free market economy if the government controls the majority of the economy. That, like, to me, that makes no sense.
Well, I think, look, for me, this is not a
Mhm.
surprise. Okay. To me, it
Yeah.
was very
Mhm.
clear since the early years of Donald Trump, his
Mhm.
socialist tendencies. Okay. And a lot
Mhm.
of people didn't want to see that because Trump always talks about how much he's a capitalist and free
Taxes and
and low
right.
taxes, but he has a few tendencies of not necessarily socialistic, but economic interventionism, right? So
Intervention,
he
or
thinks
like
that
protecting. I find it like protecting monopolies, like protecting fiefdoms, so to speak.
you could say
Mhm.
that,
Yeah.
that is more like, I would say that is a bit more like deciding what the motivation is. I'm just talking about the framework, right? They really think they have, for better or for worse, for corruption or not for corruption, right? For monopoly protection or for not, they just think they should have a role in the economy that's a bit more interventionist than, let's say, previous Republican administrations. And you can see it here, right? Intel is just the beginning. The US government now owns stakes in 30 technological companies. Intel is just one out of them, right? And we can see that Intel is by far the biggest, $9 billion. But you have about another four more that are upwards of $1 billion, and you got another five, six that are upwards of multiple hundreds of millions of dollars. So clearly, there's definitely an interventionist role that is being taken by the administration, and it's probably just the beginning. And it's part of their philosophy that they need to have a hand on the market, but which I
Mhm.
think has been a sign in the communications for a long time. But also with the new AI and tech
Mhm.
reality, they think they have to keep have an even more hands-on approach.
I see. I see. Because yeah, they're using arms and weapons controls to restrict the usage of AI by the general population. You could, I mean, I haven't fully cooked this idea, but you could make an argument that actually, if AI is a weapon, then the Second Amendment should qualify it. I mean, people have a right to bear arms, right? Fine, they don't have a right to have tanks and fighter jets, but people have a right to defend themselves. And um, like this open, not having access to open weighted models is saying, okay, the government can have guns, but you're only allowed a stick.
Right. I think that's a really good analogy, right? Of course, it doesn't apply to, like, it will never, unless there's a huge constitutional
Mhm.
renewal, it doesn't really
Right.
apply to the current legal templates. But yeah, I like
Mhm.
the metaphor. I do believe it's true. I do think naturally there will. be a place for like open models in the US ecosystem. I think they're not gonna have a choice. And the Chinese are also gonna have to take the other approach, right? I think in
Mhm.
the end both strategies are gonna merge. The Chinese are gonna realize that yeah, they do have to control some things. And they probably are already. They already announced that they would. These models is still released, but I think they're still doing things behind closed doors. As the Americans realize, okay, we also gotta free our markets more, free our models more, and make them open
Yeah,
way too. So I think in the end, both
I see.
strategies are gonna converge.
Okay, because what I'm thinking is like, okay, if all these vulnerabilities are being exposed with the Chinese model, like America is not the only one affected by that. I'm sure companies and institutions in China are also affected by it or vulnerable by the open weighted models. No,
Yeah,
we just don't hear about it.
of course. I mean, but then again, like institutions across the world have had an advance in these hacks, right? We saw it in June when Mythos was released by Claude, and then
Yeah.
the U.S. government announced export arms control. Then these a lot of the companies, the Fortune 500 companies, the institutions, the other world countries, governments, they were able to use these models to attack their systems before even the Chinese got open weighted, right? So they got preferred access. Uh, I listened to Ian Bremmer, which is one of my best preferred analysts for geopolitics, and the question he was asking is like, in this race on AI, who are people gonna tend towards, right? For example, is the Mexico may be an easy bet, but let's say Brazil. Will the Brazilian government institutions and economy adapt more like US models or Chinese models, right? And it's still too early to tell. It depends on being like uncensored and open weight and free, free in the sense that not like in the price sense, but on the sense of freedom. That is one factor. Another factor is cost and scale, right? How affordable the models are for their strength. You don't always need the most powerful model, the frontier model. You sometimes need the most economical models. So that's also another consideration. And then comes in the fact that the models can be frontier models too, right? So I would say those are the three variables to take into account, and will
Okay.
decide the future landscape.
Well, the space is evolving extremely fast, so I'm excited to see where this is gonna go. I mean, we can be having a very different conversation a year from now, or even 2 years from now, right? Yeah.
Exactly. That's right. Anything else
Um,
you want to add, Claudia, before we end this episode?
no, the only thing was that when an AI agent refuses a task, to me that gives me like very scary vibes. Like the machine's taking over, right? Uh, that's yeah. That's why like this whole sense of freedom and not having restricted AI. Part of that is also for us to stay in control and not the machines like totally taking over, because that would be great.
It feels like that, but it's
Uh-huh.
simpler. It's more boring than
Yeah.
that. Just the U.S.
Yeah.
government and tech executives
Okay.
decide, right?
Yeah.
The scary part will be when they're running simulations internally for these models,
Hmm.
and the models are behaving, are disobeying. That is scary, right?
Right.
Uh,
Right.
but we haven't yet seen that publicly.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah, thank you, Claudia. One last thing that I wanted to point at is, for example, yesterday I replied to the CTO of Ledger, who says now that the spam war is over and BIP 110 failed, can we talk about the real bit upgrade Bitcoin needs? And he talks about post quantum migration being not optional. He
Mm-hmm.
talks about the fact that there are NIST standardized approved algorithms that the big tech and all the other institutions are going to adopt. He talks about specific Bitcoin research that is done for like Bitcoin post quantum cryptography. He talks about throughput. He talks about what happens that coins don't move. He talks about the timeline, saying we need to move fast because we need 5, 10 years. Like it's too long, right? We need to do it within five. Um, sees Bitcoin potential. Bitcoin can reject the bad idea. Now let's see how fast they can adopt a necessary one. Okay, so I would be very careful with. First of all, this is clearly AI generated,
Mhm.
but I would be very careful with that. It sounds reasonable, but there are two reasons why we need to be extremely conservative. The first one is if you read this text, and everyone that talks about post quantum cryptography makes these two mistakes. The first one is talking about let's just use NIST standards. Well, let me remind
That's a
you all,
Trojan. That's a Trojan horse.
yeah, let me
Yeah.
remind you all that
Mhm.
Satoshi chose SEC P256K1 uh, that was notably not one of NIST recommended curves, right? He could have chosen the 256 elliptic curve 256 NIST recommended curves, but he chose a one that wasn't. We don't know why, right? But we can speculate that it's because he didn't trust NIST, because we've seen how NIST has served as a proxy for installing NSA backdoors in cryptographic uh, curves and cryptographic schemes.
Right.
So I don't trust NIST,
Mhm.
and that I'm not sure we should be rushing towards a NIST approved because Google is doing
Mhm.
the same, right?
Right.
Google and all the other big techs doing something usually means it probably has the consent of the NSA. It might even have backdoors, and we don't want to expose Bitcoin to those risks. But more importantly, the most stupid mistake is about rushing into post quantum cryptography only to introduce classical vulnerabilities. Okay, so we saw
Mhm.
that with Hawk. Hawk was hacked by Claude recently. Uh, Claude was able to hack a digital signature scheme that was supposed to be post quantum proof, quantum computing proof, right?
Mhm.
With a classical attack. So that
Right.
would be extremely stupid. That would be literally suiciding Bitcoin,
Mm.
adopting a post quantum cryptographic scheme to then simply get hacked by a traditional hack, right?
Right.
And then
Mhm.
you've just lost everything. So I would be thinking very critically, but not simply following on the big tech steps or NIST steps like recommended by the CTO of Ledger and multiple others of this industry.
Right. No, I mean, if I had to predict where the next Bitcoin civil war is gonna come from, it's gonna be this whole quantum thing, like how to respond to it.
Right. I agree.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
very clearly that.
It's
Um,
already it's pointing that way. Like we haven't really started. There's no argument yet, I don't think. But I can see how this is gonna be a point of contention, a
me too.
massive one. Yeah.
Me too. Well, that's it, Claudia. Thank you for being here with me, and thank you all for listening. Please leave comments down below if you want us to talk about a specific topic. But that's it for us this week.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be great. Yeah. If anybody has like things that they're curious about, we can take it up on the next week.